Hello everyone, this is update for April 3, 2024, day 770 of the war, end of the date update. Also catch up for April 2 and 1. So I'm gonna start with strategic updates and then I'm gonna switch to the situation on the battlefield. So first is Ukraine continuing attacks against Russian oil refineries. I mentioned this before, this is the most efficient way to influence Russia, to pressure Russia to stop the war and withdraw the troops, or at least significantly create a significant setback in Russian war effort by creating shortages of fuel. So far, the shortages are not hitting the sort of troops on the front line. The shortages are hitting, first of all, export capabilities, Russia's export capabilities. But given that this tax can be continued, eventually it will hit the war machine. The why they are working is simply because Russia doesn't have enough anti-air defense systems to protect every single refinery, every single energy asset. And the second part of it is because old in-the-air defense systems are not designed to attack UAVs that are fairly small, and they are fairly difficult to detect for the raiders because the surface is fairly small. There is essentially no metal parts, so it's becoming kind of invisible for the old school raiders, because most of this equipment has been designed like 50 years ago or more, some of it is 60 years ago, for detection of fast aircraft that's essentially built out of various kind of like light metals such as titanium and aluminum alloys. And the type of the target that's being deployed against this assets is completely opposite of that. So there is essentially the size is many times smaller. There is essentially no metals, and it's slow. So that's really creating, this is completely, essentially, as I stated, opposite profile. So this makes a lot of the anti-air systems useless, and so this is why it's effective. The One of the Russian government officials in the Tatarstan region, where the recent attack was, even admitted that it's everyone for themselves. You basically you save yourself. Nobody's gonna come to help you. Government is not able to help you. So this is fairly open admission that this is vulnerable point and there's nothing can be done in the short term. Obviously, in the long run, there is solution. There is no question about it. In the first place, this is a very primitive tool for attack, and there's a lot of tools. The only reason it works is because Russia is so unprepared. The same as Ukraine is unprepared, and that's why the gliding bombs are working. This is a tool from this is nothing advanced there. It's just basically exploitation of vulnerability in the Russian defense, in the Russian military, and the civil defense, and it will continue because it's extremely effective. The cost of those UAVs is essentially nothing relative to the damage they do, and the damage is tremendous because if they, when they successful in hitting the refineries, the equipment, as I stated before, is custom made It takes long time. It's a lot of it is not sort of easy to manufacture. It's complex, and most of it is made outside of Russia. So there are sanctions. So it's really becoming extremely hard for Russia to replace. Even though Russia stated that by June they're going to replace everything, I think this is just, let's say, falsehoods by Russian government officials to sort of like a propaganda. We're going to overcome these problems. They most likely will not. And not to mention that these attacks probably will continue because they simply hurt Russia quite a bit, and that's very simple, logic behind it. And if it hurts, it works for Ukraine, and so Ukraine will continue those attacks. Now switching gears a little bit to Ukraine. Ukrainian president signed a law reducing the age for conscription age from 27 years old to 25. So this is, I think, nothing new. Ukraine has a shortage of, I guess I would say probably in some ways it's misrepresented, because Ukraine does not have shortage of people. There are shortage of people willing to fight, and that is actually is result of the policies of Ukrainian government and Ukrainian president in particular. One of which was endemic corruption in the Ukrainian government, and especially at the top of it. And when people see this endemic corruption, they're not willing to defend system that is not working for them, and that's very simple answer. And things will get worse from there, just because fewer and fewer people willing to sacrifice their lives for a system that doesn't work for them. And so Ukraine is going to be, and so this is basically papered by reducing the conscription age, and in pretty short order, that's not going to be enough, and you will need to go sort of down younger till probably 18, and obviously that's a dead end. There is no solution in that way, and as I mentioned before, current Ukrainian government, and specifically Ukrainian president, who essentially controls all of the Ukraine, because he has control of the parliament, control of the Ukrainian version of KGB, control over central bank. So he has essentially full control, even though the control over the parliament is starting to crumble, simply because all of those members just don't show up to parliament. They basically, it's semi-functioning, let's put this way. But again, the Ukrainian president is not capable of, and not willing, the most important, to make necessary changes for Ukraine to become able to defend itself, which is totally possible, despite all of these statements that Ukraine is, failing or is going to fail soon. Nothing is predetermined. I said this many times before, and I'll repeat it again. Nothing is predetermined, and Ukraine is still would be able to self-defend itself, and actually could be successful in repelling Russian aggression if things are done the right way. However, as I stated many times before, they are done completely wrong way. So this is, essentially, right now looks like a death by 1,000 cuts, but it will accelerate, and the failures will become larger and more apparent in Ukraine, of Ukrainian state. Another quick update on this energy system situation. So it's, as I stated, it's in pretty bad shape, to the point that these regions in the east and south, they getting chronic shortages of electricity supply. So there are blackouts, and as a result, people starting to leave some of the cities, and most notably Kharkiv. So there's a significant number of inhabitants who are fleeing west because the city is becoming essentially uninhabitable. The only saving sort of grace is that this is we going into the warm season of the year, so it's not as as bad, but for the winter, it's essentially will turn into that city just because all of the infrastructure essentially destroyed there. So, and that's pretty large city. This, roughly around 1 million people used to live there, maybe a little bit more, but plus minus. And then as a result of this attacks against them, power generation in Ukraine is that Ukraine is importing expensive electricity from its neighbors, from Poland, Romania, Slovakia, and that really creates need to increase the price for electricity for the end consumers, because price of electricity in Europe is significantly higher, 2-3 times more than in Ukraine, and so this is going to be another shock for Ukrainian population, which is already struggling economically significantly for obvious reasons, because there is no essentially productive economy left in Ukraine. So that's the situation, general situation. Now I'm going to switch to the walkthrough our front line in a clockwise fashion, as I always do, starting from very north. So the situation along the state border had become much more quieter, more sort of normal situation, no more Ukrainian attacks towards, meaning like there is no sort of with attacks with land forces, with infantry towards Belgorod region of Russia. Now let's move to the North Lugansk front line. Things here fairly quiet, just fairly low intensity Russian attacks against this village Terny without major success. They do move little by little, 50, 100 meters in couple days, but so far the Russian troops hasn't approached even this village Terny. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. Things here are also more or less similar. The exception Russian troops are has renewed strong attacks against this village Bilogorivka. Again, unclear the logic behind it, but why the Russian command decided to spend resources on it. But nevertheless, they do. There's not really much of the progress. I mean, if you can call 100 meters there or 150, that's essentially nothing. And giving the whole situation in the front line, how bad it is. Now let's move south. So the same section of the front line. Russian troops are attacking west of Bakhmut. Despite that, they kind of bogged down. Doesn't mean anything positive for Ukraine, because this is just a temporary situation where it's turning into the meat grinder, and where you have exchanged more or less 1-for-1, or maybe even 1.5-for-1 in Ukrainian favor. That doesn't sort of solve the problem for Ukraine, because once the units are ground up, then the floodgates are open and Russian troops move forward. So this is just a temporary sort of reprieve, where essentially, which will lead eventually to the flood of the Russian troops forward. But for now they are contained. Now let's move to the Central Donbass front line, where really the major effort of the Russian command This is essentially the sole focus at this moment. And as I mentioned before, there are two areas. One is west of Avdiyivka, other one is around this Novomikhailivka, Marinka area. So I mentioned before about this sort of new developments in the Russian strategy where they accumulate strong groups of armor with obviously infantry support up to 50 units of various armored vehicles, mostly tanks, and so it actually works for the Russian side. And I mentioned last time that Ukrainian forces knocked out about a third of the attacking tanks. Nevertheless, that allowed Russian troops still to advance and to move forward. And let me show you more or less current situation. So this is advance towards from Tonenke. So as you can see, Russian troops captured Tonenke, I don't know, probably 10 days ago, plus minus. But they already quite advanced quite a bit towards west, and they are pushing towards this village Umanske and Yasnobrodivka. So these troops are part of that effort. Also, Russian troops advancing here near Pervomaisk. Essentially, they cleared Ukrainian troops north of Pervomaisk. So, there is advance here, and this approach is working. It's still not working properly because it's kind of like a hybrid approach where Russian troops trying to move away from this peasant army, but they not quite where they need to be. There's still quite a bit room for improvement there. But as I stated, this is first step. Eventually, they will learn how to do it right. It may take some time, quite a bit of losses, and essentially Russian soldiers are basically guinea pigs for the Russian generals in all of this process. But that's just how the Soviet war machine works, and that's another nature of it is the top is changing the generals until there is one who can figure out how to do it. So this is exactly how this is moving. Another Russian advances are here south of this village Semenivka, which is now the sort of main defensive line. But there is a breach south of it, meaning by breach, meaning it's just salient. Sort of Russian troops squeezed Ukrainian, and they trying to, continue moving west because the giving the sort of geography of this area, the direction of Russian move at this point is basically from this Umanske towards this Novoselivka Persha in this area, because as you can see there are ponds here and they kind of like creating natural barrier for advance, and so Russian troops will have to move north of them and south of them. So and at the same time, Russian troops still didn't fully clear Berdych. There's still fight there, but the main effort is obviously where I show towards Umanske and then basically northwest. Now let's move. Let's see what's going on the Zaporizhya front line. Things here are fairly quiet, no major Russian attacks. This goes back to what I said, that all of the resources, all of the reserves are accumulated on the Central Donbass front line to make advances, west of Avdiyivka and then west of Marinka, Novomikhailivka area. Now let's finish with the last section of the front line along the Dnipro River. And here Ukrainian bridgehead remains. There is no real strong Russian effort to eliminate it. So basically it's it's turning into kind of like a phony war, what it used to be between France and Britain, and then Germany in 1939 and 1940 till actual real hot war. So in some ways, this is very similar situation here strategically. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Until next time. Bye bye.